Hi everyone, I'm Katie Knobloch and I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Public Deliberation at CSU. Thanks for joining our Community Guide program. We know that this is a difficult and confusing time for many in our community, and we so appreciate your willingness to do this work with us and your desire to lift up the voices of members of your own communities. This lesson is going to introduce you to the program. I'll talk about the overarching goals and the training plan that we'll ask you to complete, and provide an overview of how you'll conduct your forums. All of this information is also available in written form using the links on the training site if you prefer to learn in that way or just for your reference later on.
Before we get started with those discussions, I wanted to point out a few more resources available on our website. These include the project descriptions for individuals and organizations. The project descriptions provide details about what you'll be asked to do as a community guide, as well as the payment schedule. We've also posted a resource book, which provides a step-by-step guide for completing your conversations and collecting your data, as well as additional information and resources that might be helpful for you. You'll also find the interview guide, which includes the questions you'll be asking your participants, as well as the data collection survey, which you or your participants will fill out to provide a record of your conversation.
Okay, now that I've introduced you to some of the resources you'll be using to complete your work, we'll start off talking about the overarching goals of the program. Community guides are individuals or representatives from organizations who want to bring the voices of their own communities into public decision-making processes. Your primary job as a guide is to reach out to members of your own networks, so your family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, and invite them to participate in a conversation about the important issues facing our community. You know your communities best, and by acting as a guide, you give members of your community an opportunity to have their voice heard in a more familiar and comfortable environment. For this project, we'll be asking you to continue our engagement on home to health. During phase 1 of that project, we asked folks to learn about the connections between housing and health in our community. We hope that by having these conversations, we can hear about the many ways that housing and health are connected and reduce the equity gaps that prevent people from having access to high quality healthcare or housing that's affordable for their budget. During phase 1 of the project, our guides hosted discussions to learn about these issues and collected data so that we could use that information to understand the priorities you would like community leaders to address. We've already started learning from those conversations and are delivering that information to city and county decision makers to use as they develop policies and strategies aimed at increasing access to healthcare and affordable housing for all of our residents. During this phase 2, we'll build on that work. We'll continue learning about housing and health in our community, but we also hope to understand the situations that residents are facing in this moment of crisis. Unfortunately, we can't meet face to face anymore. So because of that, we've developed an engagement plan that will be conducted online and over the phone. We hope that this new strategy will allow us to continue the work that we do together and ideally reduce some of that isolation and loneliness that many of us are experiencing right now. So how does all of this work? Well, first we're going to ask you to complete an online training program. We'll ask you to watch a series of videos, then complete some activities that help you practice the skills that we discuss in those videos. These videos are designed to both introduce you to how to host your own conversations and to offer some advice on how you can make those conversations welcoming and helpful for your participants. After you've completed the trainings, we'll ask you to participate in an interview of your own. During that interview, we'll connect you with an associate from the Center for Public Deliberation who will ask you the same questions that you'll be asking from your participants. These interviews are designed both to give you an opportunity to lend your own voice and perspectives to this conversation and to allow you to think through some of the issues that might come up in conversation with members of your own communities who might have similar experiences and perspectives. After you've completed the training and the interview, you'll start hosting your own conversation. In the videos that follow, we'll provide many more details about how those will work, but I'll give you a quick overview now. First, you'll reach out to members of your community and ask them if they want to talk about these issues. Then you'll schedule a time to meet, either over the phone or via a video conferencing app like Zoom, Skype, or Google Hangouts. You can conduct group conversations with between 2 and 10 participants via one of those video apps or one-on-one conversations, either over the phone or via video conferencing.
So, what will the conversations look like? We'll ask you to work through a series of questions. Your interview guide contains the exact question wording, but we'll ask you to focus on 4 big questions. The first 2 relate to housing and health, the third focuses on the effects of the pandemic and economic shutdown, and the fourth asks them about their hopes for our community. For each of these big questions, we've also provided a series of probing questions that ask you to dig deeper and which will help you or your participants complete the data collection survey. These probing questions will ask you about the barriers that your participants face in accessing affordable housing or quality health care, as well as the resources that have been or might be helpful to them. During these conversations, we'll ask you to collect a record of the discussion. For phone conversations, we'll ask you to fill out the surveys yourself. For video conferences, you'll provide your participants with a link to fill out the survey on their own. You'll pause during the conversation to give you or your participants time to fill out their survey after you move through each of the big questions.
In addition to simply learning from our community, we also hope that these conversations can be helpful for those who choose to participate in them. To do that, we're going to ask you to learn a little bit about the resources that different organizations, like the United Way, the City of Fort Collins, the Larimer County Food Bank, our Poudre School District, are providing for residents right now. We don't expect you to become an expert, but Sarah from La Familia will offer a training in a later video that encourages you to learn a little bit about these resources and think about who they might be helpful for. During your conversations, we ask that you listen to the biggest needs that your participants express. If the person you are talking to says that they are having trouble finding food, you might direct them to the food bank, to the school district, or to adopt a neighbor. If they're having trouble paying a rent, you might recommend they connect with Neighbor to Neighbor. Again, the goal isn't for you to become an expert on these resources, but we hope we can use these conversations to connect just a few more community members with resources that might help them weather this crisis. Sabrina, our managing director, will provide more details about these questions and how to collect your data in a later video, but I wanted to make a few notes here. First, your interview guide provides suggested questions, but you do not have to follow it as an exact script. If you've already addressed a question in a previous part of the conversation, you can simply skip the question. If it's easier to ask some of these questions in your own words, please do that. If participants aren't comfortable answering some of the questions, that's okay, just move on to the next question. On that same note, listen to your participants and ask them follow-up questions based on what they have to say. You know your communities best, and we trust you to have the conversations that make sense to you and to your participants, and to collect the data that is most meaningful to our community members. The second point I want to make is that the interview guide and the data collection survey do not match each other exactly, but they do ask you to address the same topics. Before you begin your discussions, take a look at the interview guide and the data collection survey together. This will help you better understand how you can use your conversations to collect the data that we'll ask for in the survey.
Okay, now that we've talked about the conversations themselves, the last thing we'll talk about are the timeline for the project and the payment schedule. Let's review the overarching timeline first. First, you'll complete the online training. Next, you'll participate in your own interview. After that, you'll contact community members to schedule your conversations. Then, you'll host your conversations and collect the data. You can complete the training and begin your interviews on your own timeline, but we would like you to have all of your conversations completed and the data on its way to us by August 15th. This will give us time to process the data to include in a community-wide forum we hope to host in early fall 2020. We will have more capacity to complete your initial interview before July 1st, so if possible, we'd appreciate it if you could complete the training and participate in your own interview by then, though we can be flexible if that timeline doesn't work for you. The important thing to remember is that we need you to have your conversations and data collection completed by August 15th. Now, last but not least, how does payment work for this? Based on feedback from previous versions of this program, we wanted to give you some flexibility in how involved you'd like to be and to vary our payments based on your desired level of involvement. I'll talk about payments to individuals and then payments to organizations. For individuals, you'll receive $75 for completing the trainings, including participating in your own interview with a CPD associate. We'll mail you the first check once you've completed the interview. After this, you'll receive payment based on the number of conversations you conduct and the number of participants in each conversation. For every one-on-one interview that you conduct and collect data for, you will receive $25, and these can be either over the phone or via video. For every video conversation you conduct with between 2 and 5 participants, you'll receive $50. For every video conversation you conduct with between 6 and 10 participants, you'll receive $75. You can combine these conversations in any way that makes sense to you, but we can only pay up to $175 total for all of the conversations you conduct. You could, of course, conduct fewer conversations and receive less, or conduct more conversations, with the understanding that we cannot pay individuals more than $175 for the conversations they conduct on their own. After you've completed all of your conversations, send us an email letting us know how many conversations you had and how many people participated in each. We'll then calculate your payment and mail you a second check. For organizations who wish to act as community guides, you'll receive $125 for completing the trainings and participating in an interview. You'll then receive $40 for every one-on-one conversation, $75 for every conversation with between 2 and 5 participants, and $100 for every conversation with between 6 and 10 participants, up to an additional $275. Like individuals, you can do as many or as few conversations as you would like within that limit. Alternatively, a representative from an organization can simply participate in an interview without completing the training or conducting their own conversations and receive a $75 stipend. We will have to ask organizations participating in the Community Guide program to sign up as vendors with CSU so that you can invoice us for this work, though we can provide an invoice template if that's helpful, and organizations already listed as CSU vendors will not have to do so again. You will not need to be a vendor to participate in the single interview.
Finally, whether you're an individual or a representative of an organization, after we have completed our work together, we'll ask you to provide feedback on your experience with the Community Guide program. We'll provide some dates for a conversation that you can join with us, or you can choose to fill out an online survey. Our hope is that we learn from you about how to better design these types of engagement in the future. Thank you again for your work as a community guide and your willingness to do this work with us, even in this difficult moment. We are so proud of the work that we do together and so grateful for the time, energy, and passion that you bring to our community. Please get in touch if you have any questions or need any assistance, and we look forward to talking with you during your post-training interview. Thanks.